Toronto, in Ontario, Canada, in lovely 1995. It's 5 a.m. You roll yourself out of bed and start your groggy morning routine. Despite needing to wake up so early, you're excited. It's Friday, and you have a great weekend ahead of you. You rush out the door, grabbing your pager, and head for the subway. After dropping your token into the turnstile, you make your way down to the platform and wait amongst the crowds to board your train. You and 200 other passengers sit and stand in the sleepy morning silence as the subway rattles down the tracks. Halfway between St. Clair and DuPont Station, you start to wake up and get ready to dart out the doors as the subway begins to slow. Suddenly, there's a loud screech and then an explosion. You find yourself flying across the car and impacting a pole, knocking you unconscious. You have just been involved in Canada's worst subway crash to date. Your subway has run into the back of another stationary train, shaking the lives of 400 to 600 other passengers. Rescue crews would spend all day and all evening pulling survivors from the crash in the hot August weather. In the end, 3 commuters would lose their lives. You, along with 29 others, would be taken to hospital with serious injuries. Join me as we discuss the 1995 Toronto subway accident. The 1995 Toronto subway accident, also known as the Russell Hill subway accident, occurred on August 11th, killing 3 people and injuring 30. The accident took place on Toronto's Line 1 subway, between Yonge and University, when one train rear-ended another. This resulted in a 5-day closure of the subway line. To date, it is still considered the deadliest subway accident in Canadian history.
The Toronto subway is operated by the Toronto Transit Commission, also known as the TTC. Estimated to have carried over 31 billion passengers to date, it is Canada's highest volume transit system, and one of the few subways operating in the country.
The TTC's highest single ridership day at just over 1.4 million passengers was recorded on Wednesday, September 27th, 2023. I'm sure that number has since grown and that record will be dethroned, either in 2024 statistics or 2025 statistics. The TTC connects with MyWay, Brampton Transit, York Region Transit, Durham Region Transit, and GO Transit, all of which are surrounding regions and municipalities bordering the city of Toronto, with the exception being GO Transit, which is a provincial-run, inter-regional transit network that offers bus, heavy rail, and soon light rail transit. On screen now you can see the entire TTC system map. This includes its bus and streetcar routes, and as you can see, it reaches nearly every nook and cranny of the city of Toronto. However, the subway network is much more basic, and to those of you listening in larger cities in other countries, especially if you're from Europe or Asia, you will laugh at this next map, which shows the comprehensive Toronto subway network. It is really comprised of 4 lines, with the exception being that the blue third line is now closed and has been for the past year or so due to maintenance issues and safety concerns. The yellow line is the line subject to today's discussion. This is line 1 and one of the most infamous lines in Toronto. The section spanning between Yonge and University can be seen on screen. The Russell Hill subway crash happened roughly here, between St. Clair and DuPont. Well, in 1995, the level of ridership, as well as the level of service, would have been significantly less than we would see today. Those of you watching might wonder, what caused this accident? And of course, we'll discuss that today. For those of you that are fans of shows like Mayday, you will know that generally accidents of this type are chalked up to negligence of one form or another. This doesn't always mean direct negligence, intentional, or a means of corner cutting. Sometimes they are done with the best intentions and are thought to be correct with the knowledge at the time. However, today we will go through what caused this accident. At the end of the investigation, 2 direct causes were highlighted for the TTC crash. One was a lack of driver experience by new operator Robert Jeffrey, and 2 was a design error on the part of the TTC signal system at the time. To fully understand what may have caused the 1995 Toronto subway crash, we have to get a basic understanding of how the signal system worked on the subway at the time. Now, many of you listening may have absolutely no idea how rail signals work. I want to reassure you that I also have no idea how rail signals work, but I did as much research as I could to make this video, and I really hope that I can deliver it accurately and simply so that everybody can understand it, at least to a degree that helps make this story make sense. Those of you that do have knowledge on this, I'm sure will cringe at my description and my oversimplification of the topic, so I do apologize in advance. However, back in 1995, the Toronto subway system utilized wayside signals. Now, these are signals that are basic, but do require the driver or the operator of the subway to remember the information delivered at a signal until they reach a subsequent signal which updates the information on the track. Now, there are 3 basic signals on the subway. Red, which means stop and stay. Yellow, which means the next signal is red and a driver should be prepared to stop. And green, which means the next signal is not red and it is safe to proceed at a normal operating speed. Basic? Yeah, I thought so too. However, this is where it gets slightly more complicated. In stretches of downgrades, curves, and switches, the TTC implements speed control signals. These speed control signals work to operate or regulate grade timing. That's simply just the speed of the subway down the track. And they are indicated by an additional white light which exists below the previous mentioned lights. However, these signals are not utilized in the same way. They are not utilized to deliver a track condition ahead of the signal that you're seeing. They are just meant to control speed. And they are controlled by the speed at which the subway is approaching that signal. So, a white light means that the next signal is red, or double red, because of grade timing. And if a train is approaching at the proper speed, this light will clear to a less restrictive condition before the train gets there. If the train is going too fast, it will pass the red signal and be stopped by a train stop, which is essentially just a means to stop an out-of-control train or subway in this condition. In 1995, the speed control signal provided no indication of what the signal would be after coming out of a speed control area, meaning that if a prior signal before entering a speed control zone indicates yellow, the operator would be expected to remember that coming out of the speed control zone, the upcoming signal light would be red, requiring them to stop. To complicate matters more, long downgrade sections may have several grade timing signals that would change from red over white to yellow over green, and then green if the train passed at the correct speed. As such, a new operator may forget the yellow signal, and seeing a green light would continue at their full operating speed. So this is where the human error element comes into play. Back in 1995, St. Clair West to DuPont Station held 3 grade timing control signals. The signal at the end of the St. Clair West station was an interlocking signal, and therefore had 3 lighting conditions. In this case, it showed yellow over green over white, whenever there was nothing to delay the train. As Robert's train passed this signal, however, it was showing yellow over green. As such, it was telling him that he needed to stop at the following signal, identified as SP71. This signal was red because another train was occupying the block ahead. After the accident, Robert was interviewed and said he remembered the signal as yellow over white, a condition that is apparently impossible for this signal. Therefore, it was determined that he must have misremembered or was fooled by some other light or reflection on the track at the time. In any case, he believed that he could proceed as normal at the track. However, approaching SP71, the light showed red. However, he did not try to stop. It was only when he saw the back of the leading subway car did Robert attempt to do so. By then, it was too late. So we've determined Robert made a mistake, unfortunately a mistake that 3 people did not come back from, and many more were seriously injured. But then, why did the train stop, not kick in to prevent this accident? Well, it turns out that the primary contractor who installed the system used an Ericsson train stop, which works off of a trip arm that raises in the center of the track. However, a subcontractor was used and was responsible for designing an extension of the system. Gale Manufacturing designed the trip arm to work outside of the rails instead of the center, but did not do so to the correct specifications. As the subway aged and the rail tolerance changed, it caused the function of the stop to malfunction, and instead of the car triggering the stop, it knocked the arm down, causing a delay in the stop's activation. By the time the train stop came into effect, the subway was already well past it. In the wake of the crash, a coroner's inquest was held. The jury made 18 recommendations as a result of the crash. We'll go through 18 of them here at a high level. The first would be to reform the 1950 Railway Act to include a line which gave oversight to the TTC. The second was that the TTC should be subject to a safety audit every 2 years. The third would be to identify all TTC network deficiencies, whether this be on subway, streetcar, or bus. The fourth would be to commit the province of Ontario and the TTC to funding a state of good repair, essentially ensuring that the network was kept up to maintenance specs. This was identified as having been underfunded since the 1980s. 5 would be improving the training of TTC staff and updating the pass and fail conditions for all operators. 6 was the addition of a subway simulator to the TTC training center. The 7th was a review of the TTC signal system. The 8th was to eliminate auto key-buy facilities and implement a raised trip arm once a train has passed. This was a condition that would have prevented this accident. The 9th was improving communication across the subway, and not communication to passengers, but communications amongst operators. The 10th was improvements to internal organization communication. The 11th was to create a new transit control center and update all the skills of key staff. The 12th was to specify that Transit Control Center should only be used for operational duties, such things as intrusion alarms, facility maintenance, public information, media relations, and other related duties used to be handled out of transit control. This would be separated and given to another team. The 13th was to participate in emergency response exercises every 5 years with yearly safety reviews. The 14th was to leverage computers to improve maintenance timing and ensure all safety was kept up to par. The 15th was to improve quality control of all equipment. This would have prevented the oversight by the subcontractor. The 16th was to create traceable design criteria and limit modifications. Similarly, the subcontractor under this new recommendation would not have been able to modify the stop arm without approval first. The 17th would be to require staff to flag signal malfunctions and introduce an avenue of discipline to any staff members who did not report malfunctions on the network. The 18th was that the chief coroner would issue a press conference 1 year following the incident to update on the process of these goals. These 18 recommendations were taken by the TTC and turned into a 236-point due diligence checklist. As of 2015, nearly 20 years later, all 236 points of this checklist were achieved. So what is TTC safety like today? Today, the TTC utilizes automatic train control. This was implemented in 2024 fully, and the system allows for speed control and various cab signaling technologies to prevent accidents such as this one. Cab signaling is key as it prevents the operator from having to memorize the previous signal heading into a new one, and also increases the speed at which operators can receive track information. The work to implement the automatic system took 7 years and cost the authority over $560 million. However, the network's other lines do not have this system, and it is unique to the one line. There has been no crash of this scale since the 1995 subway crash, and today a plaque can be seen at the incident site remembering the victims. The plaque reads, "Dedicated to our passengers, Kinga Zizabo, Hu Xian Lin, Christina Munar Reyes, who lost their lives Friday, August 11th, 1995, at this location in Toronto's worst subway accident." To those local to Toronto, the TTC is fondly known as a horrible transit service, which in my opinion is a little unfair, as its weaknesses are largely due to the standard North American mentality and resistance to public transit. This is only seeing a paradigm shift in recent years. At the end of the day, it is the central public transit network for the province, and millions rely on it each day. As with my previous video, I also have a relatively large personal connection to this topic. I am local to Toronto, and I am actually an urban planner by education and have worked in transit for much of my career. I'm surprised an incident like this did not result in a higher fatality count, but does speak to the safety of public transit in the modern day. However, it is still shocking to me that key infrastructure such as transit still operates on decades-old infrastructure, and I'm surprised we do not see more accidents of this nature. With that being said, the day-to-day experience of utilizing the TTC as it is now is largely subject to delays, frequent shutdowns, and a growing level of safety concern, not for crashes, but simply violence and crime on the subway. With Toronto growing at a fast pace, these conditions are only going to increase. And unfortunately, there will be a day, whether it's soon or whether it's later, where somebody may be narrating a worse recount of history on the Toronto subway. Thank you for listening today. This is unfortunately another disaster with the loss of life happening in Ontario. Less this time than my last video, but nonetheless sad. Three people lost their lives at unfortunate circumstances, and we have to remember that that can happen to any of us, and we have little to no control over it, especially on something like public transit. All the videos and information today were pulled from news articles largely, whether it be from the time or remembrance pieces, with some information coming from the Toronto Railway Museum and the Canadian Encyclopedia, which is a great source for a lot of Canadian history items. Additionally, the History of the 90s podcast was a great source for this. I hadn't heard of them prior to doing research to this video, but they did a good job, and it's a good listen. If you're wanting to hear a little bit more and from, a source that's a little bit more used to talking to people over the internet than I am, it's worth a listen for you. So once again, thank you. I hope to continue to cover some Canadian mysteries, disasters, and other interesting topics. If you're listening to this video, you're probably like me and love that type of stuff. And there's tons of context for that on YouTube, but not a lot in the Canadian, realm. And we have a lot of interesting stuff that I think is worth covering. So I'll continue to do so. Anyways, enjoy the rest of your day, and thank you again for listening.